Alright, so before I officially get started with the to-do list component, I want to show one of the components that we're going to leverage to show our to-dos. So we're going to use a grid, and a grid is essentially how items get shown onto the screen. So a little example is, you can see Mantine has a grid component which spaces out each individual piece into its own space into the grid. And if you go into the code a little bit, you see that each item is spanned out 4 spaces. In total, this row takes up 12, and each of them are spaced out 4 places. So you can see that 1 is in one spot, 2 is its own spot, and 3 is in its own spot. And they're all equally stretched out on the same row. Alright, so grids allows us to make columns and rows and define spaces on how much each individual item takes. So we're going to use this for to do, right? So each individual to do will have its own space in the grid, and it will fit based on the values that we specify. So if I scroll down a little bit more, right, we're going to do it based on responsiveness, because responsiveness in 2023, when this is being created, is pretty important, right? Everybody uses things on different devices. You can be using the website on your computer, you could be using a website on your phone, your tablet. So having items be responsive is very important, right? So it comes with little properties that you can define based on devices that you are using. So in most cases, when you're on a computer, right, you can see right here breakpoint props. When you're on a computer, you're mostly on a large or extra large device, right? The screen that you're using is usually pretty big, so you can define the amount of space each item would take on a particular screen. So say for instance you're on an extra small screen, right, like your phone, you may want an item to take up the whole row because the screen is smaller, instead of a large screen like a computer screen, where each item can, you can probably fit about 4 or 5 different items on a row because it's a much larger screen. So this is very useful because responsiveness is very important, and this will allow us to do that. So we're going to leverage this grid, and we're going to leverage the responsive piece by defining how much space each individual item would take based on the device that the user is using. So now that we got a look into that, let's actually get back into the code and start coding. Now I actually do want to start defining some state management items while this is pretty clean. So let's do that, right? I'm going to use a snippet to use state. And the first thing I want to define is open, and I'm going to call this set open because we're going to define a modal in here when the user wants to update an item. When they click on the button like we defined, we're going to actually pass this set open function to our to-do card. So this is where it comes from. But when we click on the update button, it's going to open up a modal, and it's going to allow the user to update their to-do item. And we're going to set this to false initially because we want the modal to be closed. Then we're going to define a state that's going to be called current to do, which will allow us to know which to do item that the user clicked on. So I'm going to create a state for that. So use state current to do. I'll just keep track on what was clicked, and this is just going to be an empty object. All right. And then I'm also going to define a state for errors, because we're going to define some API requests in here. And if an error occurs, I want the user to know that an error occurred. So we're going to have a little bar that pops up whenever an error occurred. So we're going to make another state for that, and I'm going to call that is error, and I'm going to use a capital I here, and I'm going to set that to false. All right, cool. So now we can actually start defining some of the specific functions that will make the API request. So the first thing I'm going to start off with is the update to do. And what we're expecting is an object. So I'm just going to place in a variable right here because we're expecting a parameter to be entered in, or a value to be entered in as a parameter. And that's just going to be the object that we're going to update or send to our API to be updated in our database. And then what we're going to do is the usual fetch, define our URL right here, like I've been saying, we're leveraging the same API that we built in a previous tutorial using Spring Boot and Kotlin. And I'll leave a link to that, to the source code, in the description. And then this is the important piece. We have to know which ID we're trying to update, so that our API knows which specific to-do item to update. So since we're receiving the whole object here and as data, what we're going to do is we're going to just inject this specific ID from the object that we received through the parameter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually change this so that I can inject the ID here. So let me just do data, the ID, and that's it. We're just appending this ID piece to the URL, and now the API will know which to do to update. And then we're going to open this up and start defining some of the methods and the headers. So the method is actually, in this case, going to be a put. It's our first time using put. And then headers is just going to be the usual content type of JSON. Cool. And then the last part would just be the body, which is the data that we want to update. So we're just going to do JSON.stringify, and then we're going to do data. All right. And then we're going to do a .then, asynchronous stuff. And we're going to expect a response back. So I'm going to get the response, make sure that we take the JSON body from the response. All right. Then we're going to chain on another then, and I usually like putting this then on its own line. Then another then, and that should actually have the actual data response from the API. And what we're going to need to do is, because we just updated a specific to-do item based on its ID, we got to make sure that all the to-dos that we currently fetched and that we're showing onto the screen, that specific to-do item is updated in our state management, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass in our to-dos through props into this list component. And then whenever we do updates, I'm going to update that specific ID or that specific to-do based on ID in our state management that is being passed through props. I'm going to update it with the new data. So to do that, I'm going to do props, and then I'm going to retrieve the set to-dos function, which, remember, we created the set to-dos in this index.js file right here, or actually in the to-do folder. We created a set to-dos, which is going to hold all the to-dos. What we're going to do is iterate through the to-dos, find the to-do with that specific ID that we just updated, and change it to the new data that we updated it to, so that we have the most up-to-date information. So we're going to pass this, array of to-dos to the to-do list so that we can actually show it onto the screen. But we're also going to pass in the set to-dos so that whenever something does change, we can actually update it from the source. So I hope that makes a lot more sense. If it doesn't, just leave a comment and I'll answer the question. But once we pass it as a prop to this to-do list component, what I'm going to do is open it up, and I'm actually going to define some logic within it, right? Because all this set to-dos function is expecting is the new data that we're trying to change the to-dos to. So essentially it's going to be expecting an array. But before that, I want to do some manipulation before I actually return an array. So what I'm also going to do is take the to-dos, because I'm going to be passing to the to-dos. I'm going to be passing the to-dos and the set to-dos function. And with the to-dos, I'm going to map through it, right? And for each individual one, right, I'm going to check if the ID of this specific to-do that I'm iterating through, if the ID matches the one that I just updated. If it does, then I will update the old value to the new value. And if it doesn't, if the ID doesn't match up, then we can just skip it, because we only care about the one that matches the ID that we just updated. So let's do that. Open that up, map through it. the to-do is just going to be each individual to-do in the array. And then what we're going to do is if to-do.id is equal to data.id, because remember, data is simply the to-do that we just updated. What the API is going to do is it's going to return the updated object of what was actually placed into the database. So we still have access to the ID. So what we'll do is do data.id, compare with the old to do. If the IDs match up, then we'll make sure to return the new data object, right? So instead of it being the same to do, I'm going to return this new data. It's going to be the new updated object. Now if it doesn't match up, then we could just return the same old to do, right? Just keep the same old value, the same old object in the array of to-dos. And after that, this should return, after running or mapping through it, it should just return an array, and that array is going to be updated using set to-dos, and now to-dos is going to be equal to an array of to-dos, but the specific to-do that was updated will have the new value. So hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, like I said, just leave a comment. And then let me see, bring this up, and now we're going to define our API request for deleting. So I'm going to do const delete to do, and then that's going to be equal to that. But I am going to expect an ID, so I just put ID right here as a parameter, and then open that up, and then I'm going to do a fetch. And let me just copy this, because honestly it's not needed for me to write that by hand if it's already there. But I'm just going to inject ID, which we received right here, and then I'm also going to copy the format of it. So let me just do that. So let me just place that under, but it is going to be delete instead of put. I don't need a body because it's not expecting that. The API is not expecting that. What it's going to do is it's going to take the ID, it's going to look through our database for that specific ID, and it's going to delete it. It doesn't need a body from us. And then I'll bring this up one line. I'm going to do the same old asynchronous chaining. Take the response, return the JSON body, and then do another dot then, and check out the data, and then open that up, and we're going to do the same, but it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to filter through our to-dos, and if the IDs match, we want to make sure that we exclude that to-do from our list or our array of to-dos, right? We don't want to keep the to-do in our array of to-dos if it's been deleted. So we got to make sure that we filter through it, make sure that it's not included in our new array, and then we'll set it, or use the set to-dos to provide the new array with the to-do that was deleted extracted from that array. So let's do that. So props dot set to do, and then what we're going to do is props dot to do, which is the array of to do's. It actually is props dot to do's plural. Then we're going to do filter, which is going to allow us to iterate through our to do's and filter through it. And we're going to do to do, open that up, then we can define our logic. It's very similar to what we just did. So if the to do, the ID is equal to the ID that the user passed, because we can still use this, it's still within this function. If the to do ID equals ID, then we can just return. We're not going to return any data. We're just going to return because that means we're just trying to extract it. We're not trying to include it again. Just return. Don't return any data with it, just return. But if it doesn't match, right, then we can just return the to-do. Right, we can actually return the data because it's not the to-do item that we want to delete. if it is the to-do item that we want to delete, then we just return nothing, right? We just go to the next one and return the to-do. And at the end of this, we know that it's only going to be missing one to-do, and that's the to-do that we just deleted. Like I said, it doesn't make sense, put it in the comment section, but I feel like I explained that one better. And one more thing that I want to do is I want to catch it, right? Because I don't want to just delete without making sure that it actually went through. If it didn't go through, say for instance our API didn't work, right? It's broken right now, it's down, or the ID is wrong and our API let us know that it was wrong. Let's try to catch it, catch any errors that occurred. And what we're gonna do is take that error and we're gonna make sure that we let the user know that the error occurred. So like I said, we created a state for when an error occurs, so we're just gonna let this state become true, and when we start defining how this page is gonna look, we're gonna make sure that we output that there was an error that occurred. So we'll just do set is error, and we're gonna mark that as true. Awesome. So that is pretty much the two functions that we're gonna need. Like we have deletes and we have updates, and then we're gonna have our modal in here as well, to make sure that when the user presses updates, it's going to open up the modal and it's gonna allow the user to update the to-do item. And we're gonna leverage this. And when a user clicks delete, it's gonna leverage this. So we got all the API requests out of the way. Now it's time to start creating the page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out these divs and I'm going to use a container from Mantine, right? And then I am going to define a modal. And we did it before. We're going to do it again. But what we're going to do is define some of the properties that the modal needs from Mantine. Remember, I imported it from Mantine. And what we're going to do is define some of the properties that it needs. So to let the modal know that it needs to be opened, we have a state here for that. So we're just going to pass that in. We're going to call this open. Right now it's false, right? So by default it's false, so the modal is going to be closed. But once we set open to true, it's going to open the modal. And then on close, meaning the X that's going to be inside the modal, when we click on the X, it's going to close the modal and it's going to update the state. And to update the state, we're going to make sure that when the user clicks the X, it's going to run this function and it's going to make sure that it changes our state to false. So set the open variable to false. And then the title of this modal is going to be update to do. And then close that. All right, so now let's start creating what's going to be inside of the modal. It's going to be the same look as the add to do modal, but we're going to add some additional properties as well. So what we're going to do is take this text input, right, just like before, have a label, a title, right, and with a capital T. Put this on a new line because it's going to be pretty long. And then what I'm going to do is get a value, and I'm going to set that equal to the current task or current to do dot title, right? So you're probably like, what was that? What does that mean, right? So text input is a a bar, right? Like you could type things into it, and what the value property allows us to do is it allows us to define a value into that bar beforehand. So since we're trying to update our to do item and we already have a value that was already initially put, we're going to pretty much insert a value into the search bar. So it's going to allow the user to see what the current value is, and if they want to update that, that's cool. If they want to erase something or add on to it, they could, but it's already going to pre-populate the search or the text input for them with the value that was there initially. So that's what this value prop allows us to do. And then it's going to be the same thing in regards to the on change. We're going to get an on change, and then we're going to make that equal to, we're going to create a function, and we're going to set the current to do to an object, but we're going to use the spread operator to take the current to do, which is going to be title and description. But in this case, we're just going to update title with the event, right? Because this is an on change. So any keyboard event that's occurring, we're going to update the title value to that, and it's going to be events.current.target.value, right? And we're using the spread operator because we're just going to include the current description value, but we're just going to update the title, right, with the current keystrokes. And then we can close that out, right? And I'm just honestly going to copy this for description just to save some time, and put description for the label, and then put this value as current to do, and then take the description value, and then current to do, change it to the description, right? Spread operator, but now we're updating the description in the current to do object, and then we should be good to go. Now when the user presses the button, we'll like it to make an API call to update our information. So let's create a button. I should put some, I already know I'm gonna need some margin top, so I'm just gonna do margin top of 10. The variance is still going to be the same. It's going to be a gradient. And create, oops. Hopefully I imported the button because I see that populating it for me. All right, I have a button right there. All right, cool. So now it should populate a gradient. All right, perfect. And then it should be from till to lime green, and then it should be the degree of 105. Now we got to define on click. We're almost done with this modal. Make that equal to that. Open that up. We don't have to specify any variables in this case. All we know is that we're going to open this up, and when the user clicks on this, is going to essentially try to update. So we're going to make a call to the update to do function, which is going to make an API request for us, and all we're going to do is pass in the current to do, right? And we're going to set open to false because we want to close the modal after that. Or honestly, it should even, we don't have to do it here. Actually, no, we do. We should set it. We should set it here. We'll set the modal here because just in case anything else wants to use the update, we don't want to put this inside of that function, right? So we'll just do it here, and then we're going to close out the button, and we're going to put the updates as the button, I guess, text, and save that. All right, cool. So now we're done with the modal, and so now let's actually start defining the grid structure and how we want to demonstrate when an error occurred. So let's just create a div. Haven't used divs that often in this tutorial, but in this case I want to define a specific style, and I'm not gonna put in the global.css. It's pretty short, so I'm just gonna do a style inline, and I'm gonna do flex direction, and I'm gonna make it a column, and I am going to define the width because I want it to take up as much space, so I'm just going to do 100%, and that's it, right? And that's just going to be inline. If you want to put in globals.css, that's fine, but I'm only going to use it once, so I just put it inline. And then what I'm going to do is define what should pop up when an error occurs, right? So I'm going to do a little conditional, right? Because we have a variable up here, a state up here that handles when an error occurs. If this is true, I want alert to pop up letting the user know that an error occurred. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up some curly braces so that I can use this variable to do a conditional check, and I'm going to do is error use a question mark, and then if its error is true, then I want to show an alert, and that's going to be for Mantine, right? And this alert is going to have a title of error and a color of red, because alerts usually it's red. So, and I'm just going to give a very generic error message, right? So I'm just going to say error unable to do action, just to let the user know that it didn't go through, but at least it's some type of warning, right? It didn't actually go through, so you might have to come back. So let me actually put that. Try again later. And then if there is no error, then we don't really have to show anything. We just put no, and that should be good enough. Now we're going to start defining a grid. We talked about the grid before. The grid, which just allows us to put our to-do cards in a grid structure. Each individual card will have its own space, and it's going to be responsive based on whatever device that you're using. So let's do that. So to use a grid, what we're going to do is open up some tags for grid. I'm going to make sure that there's some space between the grid and the alert, the error alert. So I'm just going to do mt equals to 10. And then what I'm going to do is, what I expect from this grid is to iterate through each individual to-do in the array of to-dos, and show a card for that. So we kind of already showed how to iterate through to-dos before I used the map. So we're going to do that again. But one thing I got to do is I have to have some checks, right? Or a check. I can't iterate an array that has nothing in it. So I want to make sure that I actually check for the length of the array before I try to iterate through it. So what I'm going to do is open up some curly braces, because we're going to define some logic before we do some rendering. So we're going to do props.todos, and we're going to check for the length. If the length is greater than 0, right, and do the question mark, then we'll do props.todos.map, right, and then we'll do the function, in this case function to do. Open that up, and I'm just going to return a grid column, because if I go back, each individual item in the grid is a grid column. So 1 is a grid column, 2 is a grid columm, 3, etc., etc., etc. So for each card, I'm going to have to make a grid column, and then I'm going to define a key just to make sure that it knows the unique value of each individual item, and that's just going to be to-do.id, because it's just iterating through each individual to-do item in the array, and I'm just taking the ID from that object of to-do, and each ID is different, so that's what makes it a key. And then I'm going to start defining some of the properties for a grid column, right? So because since this is going to be responsive, I want to make sure that it looks different on certain devices, and I'm going to define it for the 5 properties that it has. So remember, the breakpoint props, it can either be on an extra small device up to an extra large device, 5 in total. So I'm going to start defining 5 properties. So for extra large, which is like say if you're on a MacBook, a laptop, or something like that, I want to make sure that there's at least 3 per row. So I'm going to make sure that if it's extra large, then each grid column is going to be 4, take up 4 spaces. Remember, if we go up here, right, if we go up here, right, we see that each individual item spans 4 spaces. So that means it's going to be 3 per row, because each row is 12. So if 4 times 3, 12. So I know on the extra large screen, there's going to be at least 3 to-do cards on a row, as well as for large screens. I'm going to make it 4. I'm going to put this on its own line. And then For medium, I want to make sure that there's 2 to-do cards. So I'm going to make that 6 because 6 times 2 is 12. So, and also for small devices. But if it's really small, right? It's like some cell phones, extra small. I'm going to make sure that there's only 1 to-do card on each row. So that's why it's 12. And then we can close that out. And like I said, we're going to define an on click here because remember we made a state for the current to do. So when a user clicks on, go all the way down, when a user click on a specific update for that specific card, I want to make sure that it knows which to do that I clicked on. So on click is going to equal to, we're going to set the current to do to the to-do that we clicked on, because remember we're iterating through it. So, and we're passing the do ID to this key, so for each iteration we know what to do we're at. So if we click on it, we know that we're specifically at this to do, and I'm going to set that current to do to the to do item that we clicked on. Now in between these tags, what I'm going to do is I am going to pass the task card, or the, all right, so between this grid columns, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass the to-do card. And remember, the to-do card is expecting some property, so it's expecting the set open property, which we're just going to pass in this set open function that we made up here. It's a state function, right? It's going to allow us to open the modal from within the to-do card. Then, and let me just format this because this is bothering me. There it is. All right, cool. And then I'll put this on another line. Another property we're going to define is the update to do function, and we can just pass the function of update. Actually, just put update to do here. Or actually, since we're not going to call it exactly, we're just going to put that like this and pass the specific to do here. So we're passing a function, right, to our to do card with the to do already stored in there. So whenever we call update to do, it's already going to have the to do there. So hope that makes sense. Then one more function that we're going to have to pass as a prop is remove to do. And what that's going to do is I'm going to do the same thing. Whenever I call it, I'm just going to pass in delete to do. And then I'm just going to call it by to do the ID. And then I'm going to pass the to do, that specific to do, to the to do card, so that it knows, okay, I can get the title from this to do, I can get the date from this to do, etc., etc. And then now I got to finish off this logical check, right? Because we have a logical check here. If the length is greater than 0, then we can do all of this. But if it's not greater than 0, then we can't. So we'll just mark it as null. And I believe, oh, I'm actually off by a couple lines, so it actually will be right below here. That's why formatting is so important. So it'll be here. And let me format that again. And boom. This is a pretty thick one. But yeah, so let me just review that. So it's going to check if the length of the to-dos is greater than 0. It's going to map through each individual to-dos in the array. It's going to set up a grid column for each individual to-do. And I'm going to, show it with a specific span based on the type of screen or device that the user's on. Then I'm going to pass the to-do card to the screen, but I'm also passing the specific properties that it needs to do the functions inside the to-do card. And if I go back to to-do card, I got to make sure that I'm using the proper name. So update to do, and then let me go back over here. Where's remove? Go back down. Remove to do. So it's perfect. We are good to go. So now that we have the task list done, we just got to go to this to do page, and we got to put our task list somewhere on the screen. So I mean, it'll have to be under the search bar and after the button, and then we can show that to the user. So let's look for the button right here, and let's create another container. Let's put the task list or to-do list, and let's put the slash right here. And now all to-do list is expecting is it's expecting a props of it's expecting a prop of set to-dos and to-dos itself to actually iterate through inside of here. So let's do that. But there is one caveat. So to-dos can also be affected by the filter, right? So remember we made a search bar, and we can search a to-do by its name, right? So we got to make sure we have some logic that will make sure that this to-do list will only show things based on if it matches what we just placed into the search bar on the main search page. So if I go back, if I put something in here, it has to filter the to-dos based on that name. So whenever we pass the to-dos to this to-dos list, it will only show on the screen the to-dos that matches that name. So we still have to do some logic for that as well. So let's do to-dos. And first we're going to check if to-dos actually exist, if there's actually something in there. And if search text dot length is equal to 0, then we can just return the all the regular to-dos, right? But if search length is greater than 0, then that means we actually have to filter through and only take in the to-dos that has the name that contains values that are in the search text. So what we'll do is we'll use the filter again. So to-dos dot filter, oops, not fill but filter, and for each one, right, we'll take the to-do dot title, and we're gonna put that to lowercase because just to make sure that I'm not comparing it. It's not sensitive to the character case. No matter what the person puts into the search bar, it's not case sensitive. So I'm gonna make that title to lowercase, and I'm gonna make sure that it actually includes values from the search text to lowercase, because I'm also making sure that the search text is also case insensitive. All right, so that should do it, right? So what it's doing is, okay, if the search text is greater than 0, I'm going to filter through it, and I'm only going to take in the to-dos that has a title that includes characters that are in the search text. So say for instance you have a to-do that says get cans, and your search text says get K or like CA, right? But it didn't put NS. It should still pop up because it contains characters that are in the same title. So yeah, that works. And let's go back, and I expect to have some broken things because we didn't really check as we went. We kind of just went with the hypotheticals. So let's do use states. Let's import that, and then let's see, the grid is also not imported, so let me just go in here, and boom, I actually That actually worked way faster than I thought it would. And I already had some data in my database, so that's why some to-dos are popping up. But this is perfect, and it looks really good. I mean, the only thing I would say is I could probably add some margin right here. So let me do that. To-do card, and then let me see. That's the badge. So let's do from the badge. Just add a margin top, and let's do a 3. Okay, let's do a little bit more. Margin top of like 10. All right, that works. And then yeah, that looks good. And if we mark it as complete, ooh, all right, let me see. That there's already a little bug here. Props that set to do's is not a function. So that means in the to-do list, am I not passing, or in the index, am I not passing the, let me see. I actually am not passing the set to do, so that's perfect. So what I gotta do is set to do's, and I'm going to pass the set to do's function that we created for the state right here, and that should fix the issue. So set to do's right here, go back, and if I mark it as complete, boom, it works just as expected. One issue is this is supposed to have a cross true right here for the title as well. So let me go back to the to-do card, and let me see why it's not crossing through. Oh, because this is not the correct text. So line through, replace that, boom, and that is line through. And if we want to update, click on that, updated, and it's updated. If we want to delete, ooh, unable to do action, try again later. See, that's the alert. And actually, let me put a little, let me put a margin top on that. So this is, it looks good. It looks good in my opinion. Let's do a margin top right here, 5. And I'm liking these little bugs that pop up because this is realistic. Everything doesn't perfectly happens, and we're debugging as we go. So yeah, that little margin is fine. Actually, let me put 15. All right, cool. And then now I just got to see why is delete not working, and then we should be good to go from there. So ID, put delete, localhost v1 to do ID, and then let me see, iterate through there. Honestly, I can go to the network and also see. So if I try to delete, let me go to my network. If I try to delete again, you see. So it did delete here. It says it's successful, properly removed. But right here, unable to delete item ID is not found. So let me see, refresh that. Somehow maybe it didn't refresh properly or something, but I guess it's trying to delete something that's already been deleted. But if I delete now, I guess it's just not updating the UI properly. So let me see. If ID is set to do's, that's the issue. It's actually set to do's. So when I'm deleting, it's not actually updating the UI, but it's actually deleting on the API. So let me refresh that, and hopefully once we get this resolved, delete this, then we are finished. Boom. All right, cool. We clutched it out at the end. As they would say, Kobe in the 4th quarter. So that is how you create a to-do UI, or that's how I create the to-do UI for our API. We're able to delete, we're able to update. Let me just do the add really quick. Love next JS to do description. Add that up, and then there's add another one. Second to do. I misspelled that, but it's fine. To do description. right? So now we have it. It is in order, and then we could do to do, and you can see that the search bar is also working as well. So everything happens full circle. We can update this really quick to make sure that we're spelling it properly. Second to do, and you see that it's actually updating for us from the network. So this is working as expected, perfect. And just let's delete that, and actually let me just boom, and perfect. So hope you guys enjoy that. If you guys have any questions, you can leave it in the comment section below. But yeah, that's how you create a UI in Next.js. Hopefully it gives you some ideas on how to work with it, and you know, how to debug some stuff too. I'm gonna leave most of that stuff in because it's good to know how to debug, how to search for specific errors, and you guys can customize it based on what you want. And I like Mantine. Mantine was pretty clean, provided a lot of components. So if you want something really quick when it comes to development, you can use that as well. But hope you guys enjoy that. Leave a like, subscribe, and continue on. Keep coding.